guys, welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to be doing a Peekaboo distressed watermelon tumbler. I've been seeing a lot of watermelon tumblers lately because of summer, and I'm super excited to do my own little take on this watermelon tumbler. So let's go ahead and get started. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to base paint our tumbler, our 20-ounce tumbler by Griffin Blanks, with a coat of white spray paint. Having fluorescent show up bright on a tumbler works best if you have a base coat of white spray paint. I'm using both Krylon for the white and for the fluorescent pink. I believe Krylon makes the best fluorescent spray paint. I love Rust-Oleum, everything else, but I think their fluorescent spray paint is not the best. Once your spray paint is completely dry, you are then going to add your very, very, very thin coat of epoxy. Approximately 2 milliliters, and I am using CCDIY's Ultra Clear Fast Set. You're going to make sure that the cup is completely covered. Now, when you're using bright colored glitters like I will be using here, these are all from Peachy Olive Glitter, you want to have that bright base coat of spray paint color because it's gonna pop more. End of story. So I'm starting off with the chunkiest glitter, which is the Bailey, and I have no rhyme or reason as to how I'm doing this. I'm just starting off with chunky and then moving on to fine and sporadically spreading the chunky throughout the cup. And then the next one I'm using is Covey, and I am adding a little bit heavier coat of this, and then once I'm done sporadically adding that one, I'm going to cover this tumbler in Regina George. This way it's completely covered and ready to go. And the reason why I use different pinks is just to add a little bit something else in with the cup. So once I am done completely glittering and I'm happy with the coverage, I'm going to go ahead and take my wax or parchment paper and I'm going to press down the glitter. This will help the chunky glitter kind of adhere to the cup a little bit better and allow for less coats of epoxy. You can also, once this cures, add a layer of quick coat from CCDIY before adding your first layer of epoxy, which will make it a bit smoother. I did not do that. I just went straight to epoxy once it was ready. So I'm using approximately 20 to 30 milliliters of CCDIY's Ultra Clear Fast Set here. And once that completely cures, I'm going to go ahead and use a sanding block and sand it down. This sanding block is 180 grit. I probably wouldn't have done anything less than 120 just because there's only one layer between the epoxy and the glitter, and I didn't want to end up sanding the glitter. So I'm sanding the rim, sanding the edges, trying to get it as smooth as possible before I add the next coat of epoxy. Now when you do sand, you're gonna want to clean your cup afterwards, which I don't show every single time. But using 91% alcohol and some type of lint-free cloth, kind of to get the oils from your fingers off and the spray paint, or I'm sorry, the sanding bits off, to just make your coats a little bit smoother. I then did 20 milliliters of CCDIY's Ultra Clear Fast Set again, and then once that cured, I went ahead and took an 80 grit sanding block and just felt around the cup for any of the chunky pieces of glitter that were coming up and sanded them down a bit. So next I am going to add these watermelon seeds using Tech Wrap's Chrome Space Gray. I got it off Amazon. I'll link it below. I do recommend doing more than the spots that I did because after I distressed it, you couldn't really see any of the seeds. So either make them smaller and add more, or keep them the same size and just add a bunch. So that's my one big tip that I learned doing this cup. Now it's okay that you're putting this over a sanded tumbler because once you epoxy it, you're not going to be able to tell anyways, but I do recommend, again, cleaning your cup before adding that epoxy. So here I am adding another 20 milliliters of epoxy to this cup. And I'm going to go ahead and take a 100 grit sanding block and sand it to make sure it's completely smooth again, because when you're doing any type of peekaboo, any bits that are coming up, you're going to be able to see in the spray paint. So I went ahead and sand it again, add another very thin layer of epoxy, probably about 10 milliliters to 20 milliliters. And then I went ahead and took this blush pink spray paint and completely covered my cup once it was cured from the epoxy. Now I did pink instead of white, just because I wanted the little bit of pink to show through versus a bright white, because watermelon has that like pink tint. So I have these 1-inch bristle brushes and alcohol inks from several different brands. I have Ranger, Pinata, and Bria Reese. I have this little palette that I'm using to kind of mix it. I started off by taking it from the palette to put it on the cup, but then I quickly realized that it would just be easier to do it the way you would do a wood grain. I also want to note that you can still kind of see the spots from the spray paint, being kind of a thin coat, and that's okay, because once you put your alcohol ink over top of it, you're not going to be able to see the spots at all. Or else I probably would have picked different spots to do the distressing so you could actually see the seeds. So you're going to go through as if it's a wood grain, and I was dipping it, but again, I said, hey, let me try doing this like a wood grain and see how it goes. Now, the reason why I really like alcohol inks in this tumbler is because as the inks blend with one another, they bring in different shades, and it looked so cool. I really liked making this tumbler. So you're just gonna literally keep doing this over and over and over again. I eventually added a little bit of 91% alcohol ink to a medicine cup and used a smaller brush as well. It was a very thin, soft brush, but using a bristle brush I think is best because it won't make it completely smooth. It'll give it some texture, and then adding things like a yellow or a light green will help bring some dimension to the cup as well. So you don't need the exact alcohol inks that I'm using. You can use what you have on hand and kind of mix things up to see what you can get. But obviously you'll want to use something along green and yellow to see how that goes. So as you can tell, you can see how the alcohol ink mixing can make darker spots, which I like. And when I did end up using the smaller brush, I mostly used it with a little bit of white to kind of bring in any spots that were showing underneath. Once you're done with your design with alcohol ink is when you can go ahead and, after it dries, start distressing, which I'll show you very shortly. But my biggest tip I can give you is when you think you're done, leave it alone. Stop messing with it. It took a while for me to get to that point to be able to like leave the cup alone, which I think everyone has that difficulty, but that's okay. So there's the little small soft brush I was using. Just go through, it's literally adding different texture brushes and size brushes and kind of mixing the inks together can really help you with this design. So I'm going to go ahead and start talking again once I'm distressing. So once your alcohol ink design is completely done and it comes out the way that you want it to, you're going to wait for it to completely dry. Now alcohol ink dries fairly quickly, so it shouldn't take that long. And you are going to take some 91% alcohol and start the distressing process. I had the goof off there because I was originally going to use that, but I didn't really need it. The 91% alcohol really did the job. Now I will note here that I started using a paper towel, which I recommend not doing because you end up getting spots bigger than you really want it to be. So as you can see here, I'm struggling a little bit. I'm cleaning up the inside as I go, but it really wasn't giving me the look that I wanted it, and it wasn't giving me like the clean edges that I wanted. So I went ahead and took a Q-tip and tried it that way, and while it can be a little bit tedious, it definitely works. So I used approximately like 30 Q-tips, and I ended up pouring some 91% alcohol into a medicine cup and dipping. Now you just have to be careful of how much alcohol you put on your Q-tip, or else it could drip and ruin the design, because alcohol ink does react to 91% alcohol. So I'm going through, and again, there was no rhyme or reason as to how I was doing, not how, but where I was doing this on the cup. And I'm just kind of going through, and if you use the Q-tip and push kind of hard on the edges, you can kind of make it more distressed and show it in a gradual sense. So as you can see, like some of it's like the light green to where it's like the dark green. And as I was doing this, I found a seed, so I went ahead and did a little bit more so that you could see the seed. And then you're just going to do this throughout the entire cup. Finding different spots that you want to do. You can do as many or as less distressed spots as you want, as big or as small as you want. There's honestly endless possibilities to this. So as you're doing this, this probably took me, between the design, the alcohol ink design, and the actual distressing, probably about an hour. So it is a little bit time consuming. And I will note, while you're watching me do the same thing that I just explained, that I will have a blog post linked with this YouTube tutorial. If it's not posted the same day, it'll be posted within 24 hours of me posting the video. It'll have the full supply list, as well as a bit of extra instructions, and I'm even going to include a free file. As always, I'm going to do the cost breakdown of this cup and the recommended selling price of what you should sell it for, which incorporates the time that you are working on it and the materials that you're using. Other than that, I'm going to go ahead and stop talking again so you guys can watch me distress this cup. Once you are satisfied with your cup distressing spots, you are going to go ahead and add on a 10 to 20 milliliter. I would just do 20 milliliters of epoxy. I'm using, again, CCDIY fast set epoxy. Make sure you torch your epoxy to get rid of any bubbles. So here is that space gray I was talking about by Tech Wrap. Originally, this is what I was going to use for part of my design, but after I put it on the cup, you couldn't really see it, so I changed it to a white vinyl instead of this metallic space gray vinyl. So this is this vinyl, and then I'm going to go ahead and also use a fluorescent green vinyl, a fluorescent pink vinyl, and then the matte white vinyl. So the file for this is going to be linked in the blog as well. It's going to be a freebie file that you can use. The transfer tape I'm going to be using is Cricut transfer tape. It's honestly my favorite. I love it. A lot of people don't like it. I like it. So with this, the file that I have in my blog is slightly different because in Cricut is where I created the offset for the design versus anywhere else. So I created the offset in Canva instead, and that way it would be easier for you to cut and layer. So the way I'm placing everything on the cup is a little bit different than how the file was going to be, but it's super easy to figure out. So how I layer this is I layer everything on the mat. You can use a piece of wax or parchment paper to see if it's lined up before you lay it down. And then same thing, squeegee it. Here's the white vinyl I'm using instead that showed up better after picking off the other vinyl. I laid down the big portion first, so this white vinyl, and then I laid down the watermelon portion. I ended up choosing this quote because it is the favorite song of a very, very, very dear friend of mine who lives in Florida. She is a fantastic person, and I love her so much. So I had to, of course, include this song lyric on this cup. So then you are going to add on your decals, and once you do this, you can again add a quick coat over top of your vinyl to prevent it from lifting up at all. But I went ahead and added about 20 milliliters of CCDIY Ultra Clear Fast Set. I could still kind of feel some of the vinyl, so I sanded with I think 100 grit, and then I went ahead after cleaning it, added 10 to 20 milliliters of CCDIY's Artist Resin as my final coat because that gives the best shine, and that's it. So once that cures, you'll clean the inside of your cup and your rim, which I will be doing a video soon about that because I just got some cool tools, and take your pictures and everything else. I'm super happy with this tumbler. It's one of my favorites, and I hope you enjoyed. I hope this tutorial was easy to follow along. Please check out my blog. I'll link it below. If it's not there today, it'll be there tomorrow. And make sure you like, subscribe, comment any questions. Let me know what you want to see. And again, thanks for watching.